Maya was a 15-year-old girl who often felt like she lived in the background of other people's lives. She was shy, the kind of girl who avoided attention and kept her thoughts like secret treasures she carried quietly in her heart. Her mother worked as an evening cleaner in the city's Performing Arts Center, a grand building filled with sparkling lights, velvet curtains, and music that rolled through the hallways like waves. Every evening, when most students her age were heading home or scrolling on their phones, Maya walked beside her mother to the tall building with the glass doors that reflected the night sky. Maya didn't complain about waiting there, even though other kids might have. She knew her mother worked hard to support them, and she didn't want to add more stress to her shoulders. So Maya made a little world for herself inside the Performing Arts Center. A world of waiting, watching, and listening. Sometimes she did homework in the lobby, while her mother cleaned rehearsal rooms, sweeping up dust and wiping down mirrors that reflected dancers' dreams. The lobby was her usual spot, with its shiny floors and soft lights that looked like stars floating just above her head. Maya would sit at a corner table near a wide window, her backpack open, notebooks scattered, and cheap earbuds placed nearby in case she wanted to drown out the sounds around her. But she rarely used them because she loved listening to the music that drifted down the halls. Every evening was like a free concert, with faint sounds of violins, pianos, trumpets, and singers who practiced their songs again and again until the notes became muscle memory. Maya didn't know why the music touched her so deeply. It just did. When the piano keys were struck, her heart seemed to answer, like the chords knocked on a door inside her that she didn't know existed. Sometimes she would draw the piano keys in her notebook, sketching them over and over, shading the black keys carefully, as if by drawing them perfectly she could somehow feel them under her fingers. Other times she tapped her desk lightly, pretending the table was a keyboard, letting her fingers dance in silence, sculpting imaginary sounds. Her mother didn't know about this part of her. She didn't know that Maya watched the pianists with hunger in her eyes. Not the hunger for food, but a hunger for something she didn't yet understand. Her mother only saw a quiet girl who behaved well, respected other people's spaces, and never caused a problem. But inside Maya lived a storm that nobody recognized. A storm made of dreams she was afraid to speak out loud. Even though the Performing Arts Center was full of life, Maya never imagined a place there for herself. She felt like she belonged on the edges, like a shadow passing through the background of other people's stories. She thought that spaces like that were meant for people with money, confidence, and expensive instructors who guided them like sculptors shaping clay. She didn't believe a cleaner's daughter could fit into a world built on talent and opportunity. She thought she was just there to wait, to pass time, to stay unnoticed. But the music kept calling her, quietly at first, like a whisper from down the hall, then louder, like a heartbeat that echoed in her chest when she was alone. Sometimes she imagined a future where she sat at a piano instead of a lobby table, her fingers pressing the keys, creating something beautiful, something that could make people stop and listen. She imagined it with such intensity that her hands felt warm, her breath shaky, like her body believed it could happen even when her mind didn't. The Performing Arts Center was huge, with long hallways that seemed to stretch forever. There were rehearsal rooms on the second floor where dancers practiced routines that made the air vibrate, singing classrooms on the third floor where humming voices floated out like birds escaping cages, and on the ground floor were the grand practice rooms, where the pianos rests, polished and silent, waiting for hands that knew how to wake them. Maya had never touched one of those pianos, not once. She always walked by them with her eyes lowered, afraid that someone would think she didn't belong there. But every time she passed, she slowed down just a little, her gaze clinging to the glossy surface, the black and white keys like teeth smiling at her, daring her to try. She would imagine herself sitting there, but then her imagination would collapse under the weight of reality, and she would hurry away. One particular evening began like all the others, ordinary and familiar, like a page from a book she had read before. Maya and her mother arrived just as the sun dipped behind buildings, turning the windows into mirrors filled with orange light. Her mother clocked in, tying her hair back and putting on work gloves that smelled faintly of cleaning spray. Maya settled into her usual corner in the lobby, spreading out her homework while the soft rumble of vacuum cleaners echoed from another floor. She tried to focus on her assignments, but something felt different. Maybe it was the music, which sounded softer tonight, or maybe it was the silence in her heart, which felt like a pause between breaths. Whatever it was, Maya couldn't concentrate on math equations or essay questions. Her pencil felt heavy in her hand, her mind drifting to the halls filled with instruments, rooms filled with polished keys and echoes. Finally, she closed her notebook gently and looked at her backpack. Inside it was a worn music journal she had bought from a thrift store with coins she saved from lunch money. The pages were filled with scribbles of melodies she imagined, notes she didn't fully understand, sketches of keys and chords she figured out through guesswork. It wasn't real sheet music, not really, just pieces of a mind trying to make sense of something it loved without knowing how. Maya tapped her fingers lightly on the table, her hands moving like they had a mind of their own. Her body felt restless, like her bones were asking her to move, to go somewhere, to do something she usually wouldn't dare. She looked toward the hallway that led to the practice rooms. The lights there flickered softly, like quiet stars guiding a traveler. She hesitated, her breath catching. She knew her mother would be cleaning the dressing rooms upstairs and wouldn't come down for another hour. There were no rehearsals scheduled tonight. The lobby calendar said so. Only a few staff members and occasional technicians walked around, handling small tasks and checking equipment. If there was ever a moment to try, maybe this was it. Her heart pounded at the thought, thumping against her ribs like wings against a cage. She stood up slowly, like someone learning how to walk in a dream. Her chair made a soft sound as it moved, a sound that felt louder than thunder in her own ears. Maya stepped into the hallway, her sneakers making soft taps on the floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, like fear grabbed her ankles trying to pull her back to safety. But the music inside her was stronger tonight. It pushed her forward, gently but firmly. Her palms were sweating, and she wiped them on her jeans, trying to stop her hands from shaking. As she moved deeper into the building, she passed posters pinned on the walls. They showed famous musicians, dancers, singers, people who had performed on stages around the world. Their smiles glowed like confidence itself, like they knew where they belonged and never questioned it. Maya looked away, her stomach twisting with a mixture of admiration and envy. She reached the practice room hallway, which was quieter than any place she had been in before. The air was still, as if it was holding its breath, waiting. The first few doors were closed, small signs on them reading reserved or equipment inside. But door number 7, the one near the end, was open, just a little like someone had left an invitation. Maya stopped in front of it, feeling frozen to the floor. Through the gap, she could see the edge of a grand piano, its shape unmistakable. The top was open, like a flower in bloom, the keys glowing faintly in the soft light of the room. She felt her heartbeat in her throat, in her wrists, in her fingertips. She looked around, checking the hallway, afraid someone would appear and ask her what she was doing. No one came. The only sound she heard was the far-off hum of a vacuum and her own breathing. Before she could talk herself out of it, she stepped inside the room. The air inside smelled like old wood and sheet music. The walls were covered in panels that softened sound, making the room feel like a world of its own. Maya walked toward the piano like someone approaching a miracle. She reached out her hand, fingers trembling, and gently touched the edge of the instrument. It felt cool and smooth, like something precious. Her knees felt weak, but there was a quiet strength growing somewhere inside her, like roots pushing into the ground. She had never sat at a real piano before, only imagined it. But now she was so close she could see her reflection in the glossy surface of the keys, her face small and unsure. She pulled out the bench, the legs making a soft scrape on the floor that echoed too loudly in her ears. Maya sat down slowly, her legs shaking, her hands resting on her lap as if waiting for permission. She remembered all the times she had imagined this moment, and yet now that she was here, she felt like she might faint. She closed her eyes and inhaled, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach that felt more like birds, ready to take flight. Then, finally, she lifted her hands and hovered them over the keys. Her fingers felt like they were made of electricity, buzzing with nervous energy. She didn't know what would happen next, or if she even had the right to touch the piano. But the silence around her felt like it was asking her to try, gently, kindly, like a friend handing her courage. And in that moment, in that quiet room far from the lobby where she usually waited, Maya was no longer just a cleaner's daughter waiting for the night to pass. She was a girl sitting at a piano for the first time, holding the possibility of music in her hands. She didn't know what the future held, and she didn't expect anything magical. She just wanted to play, to feel the keys, to hear a sound that belonged to her. And with a deep breath, she pressed her first note. Maya pressed her first note, and the sound rang through the quiet room like a small light waking in the dark. It was just a single note, nothing fancy, just a gentle touch. But her ears swallowed it like water in a desert. She waited for something to happen, for someone to shout at her or for an alarm to go off. But the room remained calm. Encouraged, she played another note, then another, creating a little trail of sound like footsteps leading her forward. She didn't know proper techniques or how to sit like professionals did. She didn't know how to curl her fingers perfectly or how to relax her wrists just right. All she knew was the music that lived inside her. A map of sounds her heart had drawn over years of listening from the hallway. So she let her hands move, unsure but willing, and the piano responded like it had been waiting for her. The first real melody she tried was something she had stitched together in her imagination. It wasn't a famous song, and it didn't belong to any genre she knew. It was just something simple, like raindrops turned into notes, soft at first then growing a little bolder. As her fingers traveled, she surprised herself, her body moving as if it remembered something her mind had never learned. There was no audience to please, no teacher to correct her, no pressure, just her, the piano, and a room that felt like a secret world she had finally unlocked. Her heartbeat slowed, her shoulders relaxed, and her fingers became braver. Maya didn't realize it yet, but this was the first moment in her life where fear and joy were holding hands instead of fighting each other. She played for several minutes, each moment turning into something she didn't want to let go of. Then a soft creak in the hallway snapped her attention. Her hands froze above the keys, and she held her breath like she was hiding underwater. Her eyes darted to the door, but no one appeared. So she forced herself to exhale, shaky and nervous. The sound must have woken something inside her, because now she wanted more. She slid her fingers into a short rhythm she had memorized from hearing it through a cracked door one night. It belonged to a pianist who practiced in the rehearsal hall every Thursday. A piece with sharp rises and sudden dips like sunlight flashing between passing clouds. She had tried to copy it once on her desk at home, but the table had no voice, no pulse like the piano did. Now, here, she could feel the notes. She could feel the vibrations under her fingertips like tiny sparks racing up her hands. The feeling made her chest tighten with a strange type of happiness, the kind that makes you feel scared too, like emotion overflowing a cup. She wondered if anyone else ever felt this, or if she was strange for wanting something she didn't even know how to ask for. Was it wrong to love something that might never belong to her? She wondered. Minutes passed, or maybe more. She couldn't tell. Time had melted. She was so lost in the sound that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching from the hallway. They were soft at first, a distant echo, then clearer as someone moved closer. Maya didn't notice until the door, still half open, was pushed gently by a passing breeze or maybe a hand. She jerked her head up, startled, her fingers slamming the keys into an accidental chord that sounded like a crash rather than music. Her breath caught as she saw a shadow fall across the doorway. She thought it was her mother, and panic surged like cold water. Her mother never discouraged her, but she didn't know about this part of her. And Maya didn't want to disappoint her or make her worry about dreams that felt too big. But it wasn't her mother. It was someone from the building staff, a stage technician who often moved lights and cables across rehearsal rooms. He was an older man, quiet, with soft eyes and hands that always seemed dusty from handling equipment. He blinked in surprise when he saw her sitting there, and Maya's heart nearly burst from her chest. "I'm sorry," she blurted out, her voice cracking like the edge of a broken plate. She stood so quickly the bench slid backward a few inches, scraping against the floor. Her hands trembled as she tried to step away from the piano, feeling like she had just committed a crime. I shouldn't be here, I'm sorry, she repeated, words tumbling over themselves. The technician raised his hands slowly, palms open like someone calming a frightened animal. It's all right, he said gently, his voice soft enough that it almost blended with the piano's fading echo. Maya couldn't believe it. She blinked hard, unsure if she had imagined his kindness. He stepped inside the room just a little, careful not to startle her again. That was you playing, wasn't it? He asked, though it didn't sound like a question meant to trap her. She nodded, eyes on the floor, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. I'm not supposed to, she whispered. I know I'm not supposed to touch it. Her voice was barely more than a breath, like she was afraid the room itself might judge her. The technician shook his head slowly, a hint of a smile softening his features. You didn't break anything, he said. And that music, it was nice. Maya felt something spark in her chest at those words. A tiny flame of disbelief. No one had ever heard her play before, not like this, not on a real piano. The technician leaned on the door frame and looked at the instrument. You know, I've heard a lot of people practice in this room, he said thoughtfully. Professionals, students, people who've trained since they were barely older than you. His tone wasn't bragging, just sharing, like someone offering a small truth. And what you played, it didn't sound like them, but it sounded like someone who feels the music, really feels it. Maya didn't know what to do with his words. They felt too big to hold. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, to melt into the floor so she didn't have to be seen. But at the same time, she wanted to keep playing, to show the stranger that what he heard wasn't an accident. Both desires battled quietly in her chest, twisting her heart in opposite directions. She thought of her mother, working upstairs, scrubbing mirrors and mopping floors. She thought of how tired her mother looked on the bus ride home every night, and how she never complained. Maya wondered if she was doing something selfish by sitting here, by dreaming of something so far away from their world. Her throat tightened as guilt tugged at her, heavy like a chain. The technician must have sensed her discomfort because he stepped back, giving her space. I'm not here to stop you, he said carefully. I was just passing by. He nodded toward the piano. If anyone asks, I'll say I was tuning the room lights. No one will bother you. Then he left, closing the door again, not fully, but just enough to give her privacy. When he was gone, Maya sat frozen for a long moment. The room felt warmer now, like she had been wrapped in a blanket she didn't realize was there. She slowly sat back on the bench, pulling it forward, her heartbeat gradually slowing. Her fingers hovered above the keys again, and she wondered if music was something she could ever claim as hers. She didn't play immediately. She just sat with her hands ready, breathing in and out until her nerves relaxed. When she finally pressed the keys again, the sound felt different, stronger, steadier, like her fingers carried a promise. The melody returned, little by little, like a timid friend stepping out of hiding. This time, she didn't picture herself as a thief or an intruder. She pictured herself as someone learning to speak a language she was meant to know. Each note felt like a word, each chord like a sentence. She didn't need perfect grammar, she just needed to be honest. Unseen by Maya, the technician didn't go far. He waited in the hallway, leaning against the wall, eyes closed, listening. He didn't call anyone or make a scene, but music has a way of traveling. And soon, a passing violinist slowed his pace, glancing toward the room with a curious tilt of his head. A singer paused near the stairwell, eyebrows lifting as she heard the unfamiliar melody. Someone from the costume department, heading to the storage area, stopped and turned. What is that? She murmured to herself, tilting her head like a bird hearing a sound from another forest. None of them recognized the tune, but they recognized the feeling, an emotion that stretched like wings through the hallway. Inside the room, Maya didn't know any of this was happening. She only knew that for the first time in her life, She wasn't hiding from her dreams. She was touching them, holding them, shaping them one trembling note at a time. Her world was changing, and she didn't even know it. She just kept playing, unaware that her music was becoming a thread that would soon pull people from different corners of the building, a thread that would tie her life to others in ways she could never imagine. With each note, the thread grew stronger, reaching beyond the room, beyond her fears, beyond the boundaries she thought she could never cross. For now she played, eyes half closed, heart open, and somewhere in that building whispers began, small at first like seeds, but seeds grow, especially when watered by wonder. And Maya, without knowing, was planting a forest. Maya kept playing, unaware that her music was seeping like sunlight under doorways and around corners. Each note felt like it was guiding her, like footsteps on a path she couldn't see but trusted anyway. Her nerves still shook a little, but they shook less with every chord, every shift between octaves. It felt like learning to breathe again, like finding a part of her she had lost before she even knew she had it. Out in the hallway, the violinist who had paused to listen leaned closer to the door, his violin case still strapped to his back. He couldn't place the melody, but he recognized sincerity when he heard it. Music played with honesty has a different kind of weight, a different kind of gravity, and Maya's music carried that gravity even without formal training or famous sheet music to follow. The singer by the stairwell wrapped her arms around herself and frowned thoughtfully. She knew every registered vocalist who came through that building, every student who rehearsed there, every scheduled performance. But she didn't know that sound, that voice of the piano, that fresh, trembling touch. "Who is that?" she whispered, her curiosity blooming like a spark in dry grass. The technician had stayed nearby, keeping a casual eye on the hallway. He wasn't trying to start anything, but also didn't stop the people who slowed down to listen. He felt protective, not in a controlling way, just in a way that came from recognizing something fragile that deserved a chance to grow. He didn't know how far this moment would go, but he knew it mattered. Back inside the practice room, Maya finished the last notes of her melody and let her hands fall. She stared at the keys, surprised by what she had just done. Her breath coming in steady waves. She felt like she had just climbed a mountain she didn't know she was strong enough to climb. Her heart pounded, but it didn't hurt now. It felt alive, felt ready, felt awake. She stood up, thinking maybe she should return to the lobby before she pushed her luck. She didn't want to cause trouble. She didn't want to interrupt anyone working or make her mother responsible for something she hadn't done. But just as she reached to slide the bench back under the piano, she heard a knock on the open door. It was gentle, like someone tapping on the frame instead of the wood. Careful not to scare her, Maya looked up and saw the violinist standing there, tall, with tired but kind eyes. He didn't step inside yet. He stayed at the threshold like someone approaching a scared bird. "I'm sorry," he said first, and Maya blinked, confused, because she was the one who expected to apologize. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he added. "I just heard you from the hallway." Maya's throat dried instantly, like all her words turned into dust. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to stand without looking like she was about to run away. "I was just trying the piano," she finally mumbled, her voice faint. "I know I shouldn't be here, I'm sorry," she said again, defaulting to apology like it was the only language she trusted. The violinist shook his head, his eyebrows lifting in surprise. "No, please don't be sorry," he said. "This building is full of sound, and not all of it is worth stopping for." He paused, choosing his words with care. "But I stopped for yours." Maya's heart skipped like a stone across water. She didn't know if she should believe him, or if he was just being polite, or if she was misinterpreting everything. But there was no judgment in his voice, no impatience, no superiority, just curiosity, and a little bit of quiet wonder, like he was discovering something he didn't expect. Before she could respond, another voice chimed in from the hallway. "You weren't the only one," said the singer, who stepped closer with her arms relaxed now, her expression thoughtful. "I think half the people downstairs heard it." she added, shrugging lightly. It traveled. That word hit Maya surprisingly hard. Her music had traveled, not just to the walls or the floor or the ceiling, but into the halls where strangers heard her, into ears that knew music better than she did. People who lived in this world she admired from afar. She swallowed, trying to hold on to that realization without letting it overwhelm her. She saw more faces now, others peeking shyly from the hallway, hesitant but eager. A costume designer in a long sweater, a lighting technician holding a coil of wires, even a custodian who had paused with a mop in hand. They weren't crowding her or rushing in, just watching from a respectful distance, unsure how to approach the moment. Like they all recognized something delicate happening and didn't want to break it. Maya stepped back from the piano, her hands shaking again. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said, her voice small but steady. She didn't want them to think she was trying to take advantage of the space or pretend she belonged there. She just wanted to play, to feel for a moment like she wasn't invisible. "You didn't," the violinist said, gently but firmly. "If anything, you reminded all of us why we started doing this in the first place." His words made the singer nod, her eyes softening. "It's rare to hear someone play without trying to impress," she said. There was honesty in it. Honesty. That word felt like a gift, one she didn't know she was allowed to receive. Her mind replayed the melody she had played, wondering what they had heard that she didn't, wondering if maybe the music she held inside wasn't a mistake or a burden or a silly wish. The technician finally stepped forward, clearing his throat softly. "I was nearby," he said, almost sheepish. "I thought she should have the room to herself for a while." His voice sounded protective, like someone who had taken a tiny risk on her without expecting anything in return. Maya looked at him and mouthed a quiet thank you, sincere and full of gratitude. The technician nodded, like the thank you was all he needed. He turned and headed back to his duties, letting the moment belong to her now. The hallway crowd slowly dispersed too, returning to their work but glancing back every few steps. The violinist and singer remained the longest, hovering like people who wanted to say more but didn't want to overwhelm her. "Do you take lessons?" the violinist asked suddenly, almost gently. Maya shook her head, tucking her hands behind her back. "No," she said, embarrassed but honest. "I just listen." "And you learned like that?" he said, sounding truly shocked. Maya nodded, unsure if her answer was impressive or foolish. "I don't know any of the rules," she admitted. "I just play what I feel." The singer let out a soft breath, like she was impressed in a way she didn't want to say out loud. "Sometimes rules are the last thing a person needs when they're learning their voice," she offered. They didn't ask for more, didn't demand to hear another song, didn't push. They just gave her space to process, to breathe, to exist without apology. For Maya, that was more than enough. It was everything she didn't know she needed. Eventually they left, promising nothing but carrying with them a quiet respect that felt like a promise anyway. Maya sat back down at the piano, alone once again, but not the same kind of alone as before. This alone felt full, like the air around her held possibilities instead of silence. She rested her hands on the keys, not ready to play, just feeling the piano beneath her fingertips like a heartbeat she now understood. She thought of her mother then, upstairs with cleaning gloves and a tired smile. She wondered how she would ever explain this, how she could even begin to put into words the feeling of being seen. She didn't know what came next, and she didn't need to, not yet. Sometimes the next step comes when the ground is ready for it, not when fear demands it. So she stood up, slid the bench back, and left the room with her shoulders a little straighter. She walked through the hallway where people had listened, and it felt different now. Not intimidating, not unreachable, just real. A place that just might, have room for someone like her. When she reached the lobby again, she sat down and opened her homework. Her pencil felt lighter in her hand, her thoughts calmer, her heartbeat steady. Music still hummed inside her like a quiet engine, a warmth that wouldn't go out. And she realized something simple, something powerful, something that would shape everything that followed. She realized she didn't need to be famous or perfect or rich to belong to music. She just needed to be brave enough to keep showing up. Even when her hands shook, even when she doubted herself, even when the world felt too big, she needed to show up, and she had. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for her life to start. She was in it, playing it, one note at a time. Maya returned to the Performing Arts Center the next evening with a different feeling in her chest. It wasn't confidence, not fully, and it wasn't fear exactly. It was something in between, like standing on a bridge and feeling the wind push from both sides. She walked beside her mother as always, but her footsteps felt lighter, like she was being pulled instead of pushed. Her mother greeted the security guard and clocked in, her familiar routine unfolding like a map she had memorized years ago. Maya watched her disappear down the hallway with her cleaning cart and wondered how she could possibly explain what happened the night before. She rehearsed sentences in her head, sentences that never came out right. How do you tell someone that a single moment changed something you didn't know could change? She sat in the lobby as usual, but this time her backpack stayed closed, her homework untouched. Her attention drifted to the hallway where the practice rooms were, like a magnet, steady and sure. She didn't know if she should go back or if she should wait. The memory of the violinist and singer lingered in her mind, reminding her that she wasn't invisible anymore. For a few minutes, she forced herself to stay seated. She told herself she would only go if someone else started playing first, as if she needed permission from sound. But no music floated through the air. Nothing pulled her forward except her own heartbeat. Eventually, the stillness became too heavy, and she stood up, wiping her palms on her jeans like she was preparing for a handshake with fate. Her shoes squeaked a little on the polished floor as she walked toward the practice rooms. The sound echoed louder than usual, as if every step announced her decision. Door number 7 looked the same as she left it, slightly open, a quiet invitation. But tonight, the bench was already pulled out. Maya froze, her breath catching. Someone was there, sitting on the bench, adjusting the piano's music stand. It was the violinist, his violin case leaning beside the bench, his fingers resting gently on the keys even though he wasn't playing yet. He looked up when he noticed her, surprise flickering across his face, followed by a warm recognition. "You came back," he said softly, not as a question, but like a statement that held a quiet joy in it. Maya felt her cheeks warm, not from embarrassment, but from something like gratitude, like permission. "I wasn't sure I should," she admitted, her voice fragile. He shook his head slowly. "You should," he replied. "It's okay to show up for yourself." They stood there for a moment, both unsure of what to do next. Finally, he slid off the bench and gestured for her to sit. "I was just checking something," he said. "But this seat looks like it's meant for you more than me right now." Maya hesitated, her legs heavy, but the bench felt like it was waiting for her. She sat slowly, her hands settling on her lap like two birds trying not to fly away. The violinist stood nearby, not hovering, just present, like a lighthouse standing steady in a storm. "What you played yesterday," he said gently. "I've been thinking about it." Maya blinked, surprised. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. He leaned against the wall, his expression thoughtful. "Because it reminded me of when I started," he said. "Before the lessons, before the pressure, before the expectations." He paused, searching for the right words. "It reminded me of when music felt like home instead of a test." Maya didn't know what to say, so she let the silence hold them for a moment. Her fingers drifted toward the keys almost on instinct, touching them like she was greeting someone. She didn't know what to play. She didn't have pieces prepared, no roadmap to follow, so she pressed a single note, a familiar starting point. The violinist nodded gently. "Go ahead," he murmured. "Start where you left off." And she did. Her melody returned like a friend, unsure at first, then braver as her fingers remembered the journey. The sound filled the room, warm and shaky, honest and raw. Halfway through, the singer appeared in the doorway, as if pulled by the music like a thread. She didn't interrupt, just leaned on the frame and listened, her expression soft. The lighting technician joined her, then the costume designer, and soon others gathered again. Not crowding, just witnessing. Their presence felt different today. Not accidental, not coincidental, but intentional. They weren't there out of curiosity anymore. They were there out of respect. Maya felt it like sunlight on her skin, like a weight lifting instead of pressing down. It terrified her and comforted her at the same time. When the last note faded, Maya lifted her hands slowly, her breath held hostage in her chest. For a moment, the room remained silent. A silence filled not with judgment but with something close to awe. Then the singer stepped forward, crossing the room with quiet steps. She sat beside Maya on the bench, her voice low so only Maya could hear. "You have something rare," she said. "Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just honest. You have the beginning of a voice." Maya swallowed, her throat tight, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let spill. "I don't know how to do anything right," she whispered. "I don't know the rules." The singer nodded slowly. "Rules can be learned," she said. "But a voice like that can't be taught." Those words sank into Maya like seeds finding soil, unsure but hopeful. The violinist stepped closer. "There's a workshop here every Sunday," he said. "Not official classes, just mentorship, guidance. You could come," he added, his tone casual like he was offering tea instead of a possibility that could shift her entire world. Maya stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Me?" she asked, pointing to herself like she still couldn't believe she was the subject of the sentence. He nodded. "If you want." Maya thought of her mother again. The late nights, the tired eyes, the sacrifices hidden in quiet moments. She thought of how expensive lessons must be, how unreachable that world seemed. As if sensing her fear, the singer gently cut through her thoughts. "It's free," she said. "It's run by artists here, for people who can't afford the path but deserve guidance anyway." Maya exhaled sharply. Like breath she had been holding for years finally escaped. The room seemed to tilt, the floor steadier than her heartbeat. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, voice trembling like branches in the wind. The violinist shrugged softly. "No one ever is," he said. "But you're welcome." Welcome, a word she had heard before but never felt. It rolled through her like thunder, soft but powerful, breaking apart walls she didn't know she had built. She nodded slowly, unable to form sentences. But her body understood, her soul understood. The singer reached out and gently tapped one of the keys with her fingertip. "It doesn't matter where you come from," she said. "Only that you keep going." Maya looked down at the piano, her reflection warped but present in the glossy surface. She didn't look like a prodigy or a star or someone destined for fame. She looked like a girl with trembling hands and a heartbeat full of echoes. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the beginning didn't need to be spectacular to matter. Maybe beginnings were supposed to be messy, imperfect, honest. She stood from the bench, her legs shaking with the weight of the moment. The crowd stepped aside as she walked to the door, their eyes gentle, not demanding, not devouring. When she reached the hallway, she turned back just once. She didn't know why, maybe to make sure the room was real, maybe to say goodbye to who she had been yesterday. The violinist smiled. The singer lifted a hand in a soft wave. They weren't promising her a future, only offering her a doorway. And Maya, for the first time in her life, felt like she might actually have the courage to step through it. She walked back to the lobby, every step a note in a new song she hadn't learned yet. She didn't run to her mother and shout what happened. She didn't rush to tell her. She carried the moment like a candle cupped in her palms, fragile and flickering. Some things need to glow quietly before they can burn bright. That night, when she and her mother walked home, Maya glanced at her reflection in shop windows. She didn't see someone invisible anymore. She didn't see a background character. She saw someone standing on the edge of her story, ready to step inside. The air smelled like rain, and the sound of distant traffic hummed like a chorus. Life hadn't changed completely. Their world was still the same, their struggles still real, But something inside her was different. A door was open, air flowing through a room she always thought was sealed. Home that night felt smaller, but not in a suffocating way. Smaller like a starting point, like the base of a ladder, like the first chapter of a book she was finally brave enough to write. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers tapping invisible keys on her blanket. She didn't know what would happen next, and she didn't need to know, not yet, because next Sunday she would show up. She would walk into that building not as a shadow, not as someone passing time, but as someone with music in her hands and a chance in her pocket. And for the first time, she believed she might be allowed to try. The rest of the week felt different for Maya. Even though nothing around her changed, everything inside her felt like new furniture had been moved into her heart. She still woke up early, rushed through school, finished her homework in the lobby, and watched her mother clean the Performing Arts Center. But now, there was something waiting for her at the end of the week. Like a light tucked behind a corner she had never turned before, Sunday became a word with weight. It was only a few days away. But to Maya it felt like a mountain, both thrilling and terrifying. Each night she imagined what the workshop would be like. Who would be there, what she would say, how she would hold her hands. She practiced introductions in her head like rehearsals for a life she didn't know how to live yet. At school, her classmates chatted about weekend plans, parties, or movies they wanted to see. Maya sat quietly, doodling piano keys in the corners of her notebooks and trying not to smile randomly like someone hearing a joke no one else knew. She was afraid someone would ask why she looked excited, because she wouldn't know how to explain everything without it sounding like a fantasy. How do you tell someone that music might be calling your name for the first time? One evening, after her mother finished cleaning the last room, Maya decided she had to tell her. She couldn't keep this secret forever, especially if she was going to show up on Sunday without explanation. They walked home under the streetlights, shadows stretching behind them like long memories. Maya gathered her courage, chewing the inside of her cheek before finally speaking. "There's a workshop on Sunday," she said suddenly, her voice nervous and soft. Her mother slowed her steps, surprised by the break in routine. "Workshop for what?" her mother asked, her voice tired from work but gentle. Maya took a breath so deep it felt like she was inhaling hope. "For music," she said. "For piano." That word hung between them like a lantern, glowing enough to reveal something but not enough to show the whole picture. Her mother stopped walking completely, the bags of cleaning supplies rustling as they settled at her feet. "You want to go?" she asked, her voice unreadable. Not angry, not disappointed, just surprised. Maya nodded, clutching her backpack strap like it was the only thing keeping her steady. "I didn't know you liked piano," her mother said softly, searching her daughter's face like reading a map she never knew existed. Maya swallowed hard, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I didn't know how to say it," she whispered. "I didn't know if it mattered." Her mother blinked, and something in her expression changed. A small shift like a curtain being pulled back. She reached out and touched Maya's cheek gently, her tired hands carrying the weight of a lifetime of work. "It matters if it matters to you," she said, each word deliberate, like laying bricks for a path Maya could finally step on. Maya nodded again, breath catching, feeling like she might cry if the wind blew wrong. They stood there for a moment, mother and daughter under a street lamp, shadows stretching behind them like stories they were still learning to tell. Finally, her mother sighed and smiled. A smile cracked with exhaustion but still bright enough to reach Maya. "If it's on Sunday, then we go on Sunday," she said, adjusting the bags on her shoulder. Maya felt something inside her open like a window letting in fresh air. Sunday arrived slowly and all at once. The morning sun painted the sky gold, and Maya woke up earlier than she needed to, nerves buzzing under her skin like electricity. She put on her cleanest outfit, nothing special, but the clothes felt like armor, like a costume for a role she wanted to play, not pretending to be someone else, but preparing to finally be herself. Her mother didn't say much during the bus ride, but she kept glancing at Maya with a look that was both proud and worried. Proud because her daughter was brave enough to try, worried because bravery often walks beside heartbreak. And she didn't want music to become another thing life could take away from Maya. Maya pretended not to notice, letting the city blur outside the bus window like paintbrush strokes across canvas. When they reached the Performing Arts Center, the building looked taller than ever. Like it knew today was different. Like it was sizing her up and asking silently, "Are you ready?" Maya stepped inside with her shoulders square, her heart pounding, her palms sweating. Her mother squeezed her hand before letting go, signaling trust instead of guidance. They found the workshop in a side room near the costume department. A sign taped to the door read, "Community Artist Mentorship. All ages welcome." The letters looked handwritten, a little crooked, a little smudged, which made the whole thing feel more human and less intimidating. Maya took a breath and stepped inside. The room wasn't fancy. It had mismatched chairs, music stands stacked in the corner, and a couple of small pianos, not grand ones, but upright ones with chipped paint and stickers on the sides. A few other participants were already there, some younger than Maya, some older, each sitting quietly like flowers waiting for sunlight. No one looked like a star. No one looked like they were born to belong here. They all looked like her, like people standing at the edge of something, deciding whether to jump or step back. A tall woman with silver hair and glasses welcomed everyone. Her voice warm like a blanket fresh from the dryer. "Thank you for being here," she said. "Showing up is the hardest part." The words made Maya's heart ache. Maybe this place was built for people like her, people who wanted to try but never knew if they were allowed. The violinist arrived a few minutes later, nodding at Maya like her presence was expected, like it made sense for her to be there. He introduced the singer as one of the workshop volunteers, and Maya's chest tightened with gratitude. The workshop began with breathing exercises, simple things like sitting with straight backs and letting their hands rest on their laps. Maya had never done anything like this before, but she followed along. When the instructor asked everyone to share what brought them there, Maya's throat closed. But when it was her turn, she stood and spoke in a voice she barely recognized. "I heard music and wanted to follow it," she said, her words trembling but sincere. "I don't know anything, but I want to learn." No one laughed, no one scoffed, no one rolled their eyes. They nodded, quietly, like her honesty was more than enough. Maya sat down, her lungs burning like she had sprinted instead of spoken. The instructor asked each person to try a piano scale. Maya waited, heart pounding, hands sweating, watching others take their turns. Some stumbled. Some didn't know where to place their hands. Some giggled nervously through their mistakes. Then it was her turn. She approached the piano like she was approaching an altar, like she was offering something instead of asking for something. She placed her fingers on the keys, her body trembling, and she played the simplest scale she could remember, imperfect but earnest. Her scale wasn't smooth. Her posture was unsure. Her pinky finger lifted too high like it had a mind of its own. But when she finished, no one criticized her. The instructor smiled and nodded. "You feel the notes?" she said. "That's a good place to start." Maya's chest filled with warmth, like a lantern being lit behind her ribs. The workshop lasted 2 hours. They discussed rhythm, balance, how to count measures, how to relax their wrists. Maya felt like she was trying to catch raindrops in her hands. Too much to hold but too precious to let fall. By the end, her hands hurt in a good way, the kind of hurt that meant growth, not pain. The violinist walked her to the door afterwards. "You did well," he said, simple as that. Maya didn't know how to take compliments yet, so she just nodded awkwardly. But inside, the words took root, planting seeds she hoped would sprout into courage. Her mother was waiting outside, hands tucked into her coat pockets, eyes full of questions. Maya didn't know how to describe what she felt, so she just stepped forward and hugged her mother. It was the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. Her mother held her tightly, whispering, "I'm proud of you." Into her hair, proud, a word Maya had never dared to imagine being directed at her. It echoed in her mind the whole bus ride home, louder than the rumble of the engine. She stared out the window, The city passing like scenes from a film she finally felt part of instead of watching from the audience. That night, Maya sat on her bed and stared at her hands. Hands that had wiped down tables in the lobby. Hands that had drawn piano keys in the margins of homework pages. Hands that had trembled on ivory and made sound instead of silence. Hands that were building a life note by note. For the first time, she didn't fall asleep wishing for another world. She fell asleep hoping to wake up again in this one. The world where doors had begun to open. The world where she could walk forward instead of sideways. The world where music didn't feel like a dream, but a beginning. Maya returned to the Performing Arts Center the next Sunday, with her pulse racing under her skin like a bird trapped behind glass. The week between the workshops felt like a lifetime, filled with homework, dishes, and quiet dinners. But underneath it all was a heartbeat counting down to Sunday. She practiced at home on a cardboard piano she drew herself, the keys measured carefully with a ruler and outlined in black marker. It didn't make a sound, but she tapped on the keys like they held an orchestra beneath them, imagining notes like sparks flying into the air. The workshop room was busier this time. More people, more chatter, more nervous energy bouncing around like a swarm of bees that didn't know where to land. Maya stepped inside and froze for a split second. Her breath caught between her ribs and her throat. It was one thing to show up the first time, slipping into the room like she didn't want the world to notice her. It was another to return, knowing people had expectations now, even if they were small. The singer waved her over with a soft smile. Her sleeves rolled up like she had already been working. "You came back," she said, like it was an achievement worth celebrating. Maya nodded, cheeks warm. "I almost didn't," she admitted, her voice honest instead of polished. "But here I am," she added, like a promise to herself instead of anyone else. The violinist tuned his instrument in the corner, nodding at her in greeting without interrupting his task. It was strange how something as simple as being seen could feel like wind in her lungs after years of holding her breath. The workshop began with scales, clumsy fingers stumbling across keys, laughter and apologies mixing with earnest attempts. The instructor reminded them again and again, "You can't build skill from fear, only from trying." Maya tried, over and over, her wrists stiff at first, then loosening, her fingers tripping but recovering. When she made a mistake, she paused, corrected herself, and kept going. Every error felt like stepping on a crack in the pavement, but she learned not to fall through it. She learned to step again, slowly, deliberately, until the cracks felt like part of the path instead of holes in it. Halfway through the session, the instructor surprised them with an announcement. "We're having a community showcase next month," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "Not a competition, not an audition, just a shared stage," she added. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but the room buzzed like she had announced a rocket launch. Heads whipped around. Whispers rose like wind through tall grass. Excitement and fear tangling like threads. Maya sat frozen, her breath thin, her heartbeat doubling. A showcase, a stage, lights, an audience. The idea alone felt too big, like trying to swallow the moon. The instructor raised a hand, calming the room. "Participation is optional," she said. "No pressure. But if you want to share what you've learned, the stage is yours." Maya stared at her hands, wondering if they could ever be hands that performed in front of people, or if they were only meant for quiet rooms and accidental miracles. When the workshop ended, the singer caught up to Maya near the door. "You don't have to decide today," she said gently. "Just think about it." Maya nodded, grateful that no one was pushing her or pulling her, just offering a door again and letting her decide if she could turn the knob. That evening, Maya sat at the lobby piano after asking permission. There were other people around, reading newspapers or scrolling on their phones, but no one paid her much attention. She placed her hands on the keys and played the melody she had made for herself, the one she had stitched together from pieces of memory and imagination. It wasn't perfect, but it felt true, and she held on to that truth like a rope guiding her across a river. As she played, a man walked in from the side hall carrying a stack of sheet music under his arm. He looked older than the other artists, with streaks of gray hair and round glasses sitting low on his nose. He paused when he heard her and stood still, listening, not interrupting. Maya sensed him there, but she didn't stop, afraid that if she froze, fear would grow roots through her shoes, holding her in place. When she finished, the man stepped closer, putting the sheet music down like it was fragile. "That was your arrangement?" he asked, his voice measured, not condescending. Maya nodded, unsure if she should apologize or defend herself or pretend she hadn't been playing. "I don't know if I did it right," she said softly. "I just did what sounded good in my head." The man gave a small, thoughtful smile. "There are many kinds of right," he said, "and not all of them read the same on paper." He introduced himself as a composer who taught occasionally at the center. He didn't speak to her like she was a child, but also not like she needed to prove something. He asked, "Have you ever tried writing what you play?" Maya shook her head, embarrassment prickling her cheeks. "I don't know how," she admitted. "Then maybe it's time to learn," he said, picking up his sheet music again. He didn't offer lessons or promises, just a direction, like a weather vane pointing toward a horizon. After he walked away, Maya sat with the piano for a long time, letting the idea settle. Writing music. The thought felt impossible, like trying to build a house with no tools, and yet, something inside her whispered, "Not impossible, just unfamiliar." That night, Maya practiced her melody on the cardboard piano again. Her mother watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame, a soft expression on her face. "You look happy," her mother said, not as a question, but like she was acknowledging something new in her daughter's shape. Maya nodded. "I think I am," she said, almost surprised by her own words. Her mother crossed the room and sat beside her. "I don't know much about music," she said, "but I know hard work." She placed a hand over Maya's, their fingers overlapping like layers of history. "If you choose this path, I'll walk beside you," she said. "I can't clear it, but I'll be there." Maya didn't cry, though her chest felt full like tears were feathers instead of water. "I want to try," she said, the simplest and most terrifying sentence she had ever spoken. "Trying is enough," her mother said, squeezing her hand. Trying was a seed, and maybe one day it could become a tree. The next workshop felt different, like stepping into a room that recognized her name even if no one said it aloud. The instructor handed each student a blank sheet of basic music paper, lined with staff marks like empty ladders. "This is for experimentation," she said. "Don't worry about perfection." Maya stared at the sheet like it was a riddle with 1,000 answers. The composer visited their group that day, walking between the participants like a quiet observer. He paused by Maya, nodding at her blank page. "Start with 4 notes," he suggested. "Just for that, feel honest." Honest. That word again, always returning like an echo from the walls of her life. Maya picked 4 notes from her memory of the melody she had invented, writing them down awkwardly, her handwriting uneven. They looked small on the page, like seeds scattered on soil, but they were there, and that meant something. The composer looked at her page, nodded once and said, "Good," before moving on. Good. Not perfect, not genius, not extraordinary, just good. A word she could hold without dropping, a foundation she could stand on. After the workshop, Maya lingered in the room, practicing the scale the composer had marked, her fingers moving like they were learning a new alphabet. The violinist stopped by before leaving, tapping her music paper gently. "That's the beginning," he said. "Keep going." Maya nodded, her eyes returning to the page like it was a compass and she had just learned where north was. As the month passed, she filled more sheets, little fragments of melody stretching across lines, sometimes wrong, sometimes right, sometimes confused. She learned to erase without shame, to cross out without apology. Mistakes became brushstrokes instead of bruises. Attempts became landmarks instead of warnings. One evening, when she arrived early, Maya found door number 7 locked. A note taped to it read, "Piano out of tune. Use room 4." Room 4 was smaller, tucked away near the loading dock. Not glamorous, not polished. She pushed the door open and blinked in surprise. Inside, a group of musicians sat around the piano, discussing something in low voices. Sheet music spread like feathers across the floor. They looked up when she entered, pausing. Maya stepped back, ready to leave, her apology already forming like a reflex, but the composer waved her in. "Come," he said. "You're not interrupting." They were reviewing arrangements for the community showcase, talking about tempos and transitions and where the lighting cues would land. Their conversation sounded like another language, but Maya listened, absorbing everything like sunlight. The composer asked if she might want to share something someday. Not now, not today, not a demand, just a possibility. Maya didn't answer right away. She thought of Sunday mornings, cardboard pianos, trembling hands, and the first note she ever pressed in that empty room. She thought of her mother's smile, the violinist's encouragement, the singer's belief, and the technician who shielded her that night. She thought of the 4 notes she wrote on that blank paper, tiny but alive. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, honest. The composer nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Readiness is a myth," he replied. "Willingness is real." Maya breathed in, her lungs filling like sails catching wind. "I'm willing," she said, a sentence that felt like a door swinging open, a sentence that felt like light breaking through curtains stitched from doubt, a sentence that she could build a future on, even if she didn't know its shape yet. The room fell quiet for a moment, not awkward, but reverent, like they all recognized something had shifted, like a compass had found north, like a melody had finally found its first line. Maya sat at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. The beginning was shaky, soft, uncertain, but she kept playing, the melody growing like a plant breaking through soil, reaching, stretching, becoming, mistakes and triumphs mixing like paint until the sound felt like breath and heartbeat combined. Someone in the hallway paused to listen, then another, and another, threads pulling again, weaving again, building a tapestry 1 note at a time. This time, Maya didn't freeze. She didn't apologize. She didn't collapse under the weight of being heard. She played, not perfectly, not flawlessly, not fearlessly, but willingly, and that was enough. For now, she was not the cleaner's daughter in the corner waiting for time to pass. She was Maya, playing her story 1 key at a time, stepping toward the stage she never thought she was allowed to touch, toward the showcase, toward the future, toward herself. The month of the showcase arrived faster than Maya expected. It felt like the calendar was running instead of walking, flipping pages every time she blinked. What used to be ordinary days now felt like stepping stones, each one pushing her closer to something she had never imagined for herself. A stage, a spotlight, an audience, and her music traveling through the air like a voice she didn't know she had. The Performing Arts Center buzzed more each day as the showcase approached. Posters went up in the lobby and stairwells, printed on plain paper with the event title in bold letters. Community Artist Showcase. A night of shared talent. Maya stared at the posters every time she passed one, trying to believe she belonged anywhere near that stage. She practiced every evening, sometimes on the worn upright piano in room 4, sometimes with her cardboard keys at home. Her mother started humming her practice melodies while cooking dinner. Even if the notes were off and the rhythm uneven, it made Maya smile in a way that felt like warmth radiating from her chest, gentle and steady. Their home felt different now, not bigger, not richer, but lighter, like the air had been cleaned of something heavy. The composer met with each workshop student individually during the final week. They sat beside him at the piano, listening to guidance, making adjustments, and learning how to start and finish a piece gracefully instead of abruptly. When Maya sat beside him, she held her hands tightly in her lap, her knees bouncing with nerves. He reviewed her melody, her 4-note beginning that had grown into something with structure now, something like a small song. "You've made progress," he said simply, which meant more to Maya than applause ever could. He didn't tell her she was a prodigy. didn't tell her she was perfect, didn't make promises. He just acknowledged the work she had done, and that was a foundation she could build on without fear it would crumble. "Your hands listen," he added, noticing how she adjusted her playing based on instinct rather than instruction. Maya swallowed, her throat tight. "Does that mean I'm ready?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The composer didn't answer right away. He leaned back and folded his arms, thinking before speaking. Finally, he said, "It means you are willing, and willingness is the doorway to readiness." Maya let the words settle, like dust landing on a surface that finally stopped shaking. On the final rehearsal day, the workshop gathered on the small stage in the black box theater at the back of the center. It wasn't the grand hall with chandeliers and velvet curtains, but it was still a stage, still a place where music mattered. There were rows of empty seats waiting like open hands, ready to hold whatever was offered to them. Maya stepped onto the stage and felt like the floor beneath her was alive, pulsing with the echoes of performances from years before. She tested the piano, her fingers trembling as she pressed a few keys to adjust the volume of her touch. Soft, louder, softer again, finding the place where her heartbeat matched the sound. The violinist practiced nearby, scales rolling across the air like waves smoothing the sand. The singer harmonized with another participant, their voices weaving like threads into a fabric Maya wished she could hold in her hands. At one point, Maya felt her legs go numb with nerves and had to sit down in the front row. The violinist sat beside her, his instrument resting across his knees. "You're scared," he said, not accusing, just stating a fact with the gentleness of someone pointing out rain on a window. Maya nodded, unable to lie. "It feels too big," she said, "like something meant for other people." The violinist tilted his head, considering her words. "Big things feel that way at first," he said. "But remember, stages aren't built for the confident. They are built for the voices that need them." Maya blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means the stage isn't measuring you," he replied. "It's waiting for you. Waiting, like door number 7 had waited, like the piano keys had waited, like the blank sheet music had waited, like her dreams had waited for her to stop hiding from them." The thought made her heart swell and ache at the same time, like something too important to fit inside her chest. The day of the showcase arrived with a cold wind and a sky painted blue like porcelain. Maya woke up before her alarm, the morning quiet except for the sound of her mother moving in the kitchen. She dressed slowly, tying her hair back with shaking hands, checking her reflection in the mirror twice, then 5 times, then not at all. Her mother made a small breakfast, even though neither of them could eat much, nerves filling their stomachs like stones. On the bus ride there, Maya kept her hands folded tightly, as if they might float away if she didn't anchor them. Her mother reached over and held one hand, grounding her in the moment. "You don't have to be perfect," she said, her voice low and steady. "You just have to be there." Maya nodded, breathing slowly, trying to match her breath to the rhythm of the bus engine, steady and repeating. When they arrived, the theater entrance buzzed with people. Participants and their families gathered in clusters, adjusting clothes, tuning instruments, whispering encouragements. Maya felt her body shrink inside her clothes, like she was trying to make herself smaller to fit inside her fear. The singer spotted her and walked over, offering a gentle smile. "You're here," she said, as if that alone was the miracle. Maya nodded, unable to speak, her throat tightening. "Whatever happens," the singer added, "remember that this is not the end, it's a step." Maya breathed out, the words releasing a little of the pressure pressing against her ribs. Backstage, everything felt louder, even the silence. The curtains whispered when touched, the floorboards creaked like memory, and the stage lights hummed overhead, waiting to glow. Maya's name wasn't first, thank goodness, but it wasn't last either, which meant she had time to panic and time to recover. A dangerous combination. As she waited, she sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, hands resting on her knees. She pictured the cardboard piano at home, the lines drawn carefully, the black keys shaded in with patience and longing. She pictured her mother on Sundays, sitting beside her, humming along without knowing the tune. She pictured the night she first played the grand piano in the empty practice room, how she had been terrified, and yet she played. Her turn came sooner than she was ready for. She stood, nearly tripping over her own feet, and walked toward the stage entrance. The lighting technician, the same one who first paused in the hallway to listen, gave her a thumbs up from the control booth. The violinist waited by the curtain, placing a reassuring hand near her shoulder without touching, simply offering presence. "You're not alone," he said quietly, and Maya nodded, stepping onto the stage anyway. Even if every cell in her body wanted to run backwards, the light was warm on her face, bright enough to blur the faces in the audience, which helped her imagine she was back in the practice room, alone, surrounded by invisible listeners made of air and dust. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys like she had learned to. Grounded, relaxed, willing, she took a breath, the kind of breath that felt like beginning, and she played. The first notes were shaky, unsure, like a baby deer learning how to walk. But she didn't stop, didn't flinch, didn't apologize. She kept going, letting the melody grow, letting her hands tell the story she had been afraid to speak aloud for most of her life. Her mistakes were there, but they were small, swallowed by the shape of the music instead of breaking it. Halfway through, something shifted. Her hands stopped shaking, her shoulders loosened, her breath steadied. It felt like she wasn't playing the piano anymore. She was talking to it, and it was talking back. She wasn't performing, she was sharing, offering, becoming. The melody lifted, then settled, then lifted again like wings learning to fly. When she reached the last note, she let it ring out, not rushing, not forcing, just letting it exist. Then she lowered her hands, chest heavy, lungs full, eyes wet but not crying. Silence followed, the kind of silence that felt like held breath, not emptiness. Then, applause, not roaring applause, not stadium applause, not life-changing applause, but warm, honest, human applause, the kind that reaches the stage like hands lifting someone up instead of pushing them forward. Maya stood, bowed awkwardly, her knees almost giving out. She walked off stage with her heartbeat racing like applause had been poured directly into her veins. Backstage, the singer hugged her briefly. The violinist nodded with quiet pride, and the composer placed a hand over his chest like he understood something important had happened. Her mother waited in the wings, her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "You played," her mother whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I did," Maya whispered back, voice shaking with disbelief and joy. They stood there, holding the moment like a fragile glass bird between them. Something precious, something earned, something beginning. That night, as they walked home in the cool air, Maya didn't feel smaller than the world anymore. She didn't feel like she existed in the background of other people's stories. She felt like someone who had stepped into her own story, even if the first step was small and trembling, even if the next steps scared her, because now she knew she could take them, one note at a time, one day at a time, willingly. In the weeks after the showcase, life didn't suddenly transform into glitter or spotlights for Maya. She didn't wake up to scholarship letters in the mailbox or agents calling her phone or crowds chanting her name. Instead, she woke up to normal mornings, ordinary breakfasts, and the same bus ride to school where nobody knew what she had done. Life stayed familiar, but it felt different, like her world had been repainted with subtle colors she could finally see. At school, she still sat in the back and doodled piano keys in her notebook, but this time, the doodles weren't dreams she was afraid to touch. They were plans, sketches, maps of where her fingers might go on a real piano. She found herself tapping rhythms on her desk with confidence instead of secrecy, like she wasn't hiding from her own heartbeat anymore. Her teachers noticed a shift, though they couldn't explain it. She answered questions in class more often, even if her voice shook. She didn't shrink when eyes turned toward her. She didn't apologize for existing. It was like her spine remembered how to stand up straighter, not as a performance, but as a right. Nothing magical happened, but everything meaningful did. Slowly, like dusk turning into dawn, the Performing Arts Center became her second home. Not just a place she waited for her mother. She walked inside with purpose now, not like a ghost in the lobby. She belonged to the halls, the rooms, the echoes, the air. She helped set up chairs for workshops, carried sheet music to the storage room, wiped down piano keys with care, not because anyone asked, but because she wanted the place to know she respected it. The violinist once joked, "At this rate, you'll end up running the building." Maya laughed because the idea sounded ridiculous and yet somehow possible in a small, faraway way. She practiced 3 days a week, sometimes 4. Sometimes her fingers felt stiff, and the notes came out harsh or uneven. Sometimes her mind wandered, and frustration sat heavy on her shoulders. But she always returned the next day, learning that progress isn't a straight line, more like a river bending around stones, still moving forward even when it curves. The composer offered her more guidance. Nothing formal, nothing official, just small pointers, short lessons, questions that made her think about music like a language instead of a puzzle. Sometimes he would sit beside her, not to play for her, but to listen, to hold space for her attempts. He never called her talented, but he always called her growing, and that mattered more. Her mother still worked the same job, mopping floors, scrubbing mirrors, wiping sweat from surfaces left by dancers and singers. But now, she cleaned with a softer expression, like she was no longer just maintaining a building, but tending the soil where something might bloom. Some nights, she lingered in the lobby to listen to Maya play before they went home. She didn't understand the music completely, but she understood the change in her daughter, and that was enough. Word of Maya spread quietly, not like a rumor, but like a story passed from one person to another with care. A costume designer mentioned her to a friend who came to visit. A singer brought up her name in a conversation with a vocal coach. A lighting technician joked that she should get her own key to the building someday. None of these things guaranteed a future, but they built something like scaffolding around her dreams, giving them room to grow without collapsing. She learned to accept the kindness without shrinking, learned to say, "Thank you," instead of, "I'm sorry." Learned that gratitude doesn't require self-erasure, just acknowledgement. One evening, after a long practice session, Maya sat in the empty theater. The seats stared back at her like witnesses, rows of silent companions. She tried to picture the showcase night again, the trembling fear, the breath that felt like knives, the applause like warm water rushing over her. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of remembering it. The violinist found her there, sitting alone, staring at the stage. "You planning your next debut?" he teased gently. Maya shook her head, smiling softly. "Just thinking." He sat beside her in the front row, his violin case resting at his feet. "What does it feel like now?" he asked, nodding toward the stage. Maya thought about it, searching for the right words. "It feels smaller," she said, then corrected herself. "No, not smaller. It feels like something I could step on again someday, if I wanted." The violinist nodded, proud but not surprised. "That's how it starts," he said. "Not with certainty, but with access." Maya tilted her head, confused. "Access?" she echoed. He nodded. "Access to the idea that you're allowed to try." The idea sat in her mind like a stone dropped in a lake, ripples spreading, touching corners she never knew existed. Allowed to try, she whispered it to herself. Later that night, while brushing her teeth, like a mantra, like a truth her bones needed to memorize, allowed to try, weeks flowed into months. The workshops continued. Not always easy, not always kind, sometimes filled with mistakes that hurt more than she wanted to admit. There were days she walked home frustrated, hands stuffed in her pockets, old insecurities rising like ghosts. Days when she felt like she was taking steps backward, like her body had forgotten everything it learned. But she showed up again. She learned that courage is not loud, not always victorious. Sometimes courage is just unlocking the door and walking in, even when doubt whispers like a storm. She learned to forgive her hands, her mind, her pace, herself. One Sunday, the composer held a session on musical perspective. He talked about how music wasn't a staircase with winners at the top and failures at the bottom, but a field, wide and open, with room for everyone to walk in different directions. Maya wrote that down carefully, circling the words, "room for everyone," until the ink almost bled through the paper. Later, she sat at the piano and played her original melody. She didn't rush, didn't force, didn't perform. She just played like she was greeting an old friend, a friend who taught her how to speak in sound. A group of dancers practicing nearby paused to listen. One of them whispered, "She's the one from the showcase." Maya heard it, but this time, her heart didn't twist with fear or disbelief. This time, it steadied, like it recognized the shoes it was finally standing in. She looked up, met their eyes, and nodded politely, not shy, not boastful, just present, like a person who understood she had the right to exist in this space, the right to be witnessed without shrinking. After she finished practicing, she went to the storage room to return the staff paper she borrowed. As she placed the folder on the shelf, she noticed something new. Her name, written on a small square of tape, stuck to a blue folder slot. Maya, composition exercises. Her breath caught, eyes widening. She reached out, touched the letters gently with her fingertips. She didn't know who put it there. The composer, the singer, the violinist, the instructor, maybe all of them, maybe none. It didn't matter. It meant she existed here in a way she never had before. Not as a ghost in the lobby, not as the cleaner's daughter waiting in the background, but as someone with a place carved out, even if small, even if quiet, even if still growing. She returned to the piano, sat down again, and placed her hands on the keys. This time she didn't tremble. This time she didn't hesitate. This time she knew who she was. She played her melody from start to finish. It wasn't perfect, but perfection had stopped being the goal a long time ago. Honesty was the goal, willingness was the goal, being present was the goal, and she was all of those things now. When the last note faded, she didn't wait for approval or applause. She closed the piano gently, stood up, and smiled to herself, not because she was finished, but because she wasn't. The story didn't end with a trophy or a contract or a standing ovation. It ended with possibility. It ended with a door open, a room waiting, a melody unfinished. It ended with Maya walking home beside her mother, carrying music in her pockets like sunlight. In the soft glow of the streetlights, her mother asked quietly, "How did it go today?" Maya answered, "I'm still learning." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Good," she said. "Keep learning." And Maya smiled, the simple kind, the kind that doesn't need explanation, because she finally knew, in a way she could feel in her bones, that music didn't need her to be extraordinary. It just needed her to show up, and she would, again and again, note by note, breath by breath, becoming, not a prodigy, not a star, not a miracle, but Maya, the girl who sat at the piano and changed her life by choosing to try